Welcome to this week's Behind the Poem. I am sharing a not poem this week. I'm sharing a fresh chunk of prose I wrote a few weeks ago that is currently part of a working nonfiction manuscript I've got going on, and you're going to hear a bunch of construction noise in the background. Enjoy. It's a Sunday in early May. I've just gone through security at the Portland International Jetport after a multi-day yoga retreat with my mother and sister 2.5 hours northwest into the state. Their flight to O'Hare, I don't have two, so I'm adding it in. Their flight to O'Hare is 2.5 hours before mine to JFK. I leave my carry-on bags with them, pull off my sweatshirt, and walk myself to the bathroom to pee. As I walk, clad in a thin pair of black leggings from Target, a partially see-through black t-shirt with an image of a fractured and yet still stunning white heart, a black sports bra, and a black KN95 mask. Tell me you're a New Yorker without telling me you're a New Yorker. I think about this. Many, many years ago, like December 2018, I was presenting at this conference in another country on the other side of the world, and I was sitting with some friends in the lobby on the first day, and one of those friends had this other friend who came and joined us, and my God, was he cute. And we were all hanging and laughing, and I was just like being my extroverted and playful self. Now, remember that moment. The conference goes on. I develop a big crush on this dude. And it's unclear to me whether or not he's also interested in me, but I'm like getting this vibe. I can fucking see it in his eyes. I watched him watch me while I presented, and I don't know, I can just fucking feel that I'm not alone in this crush. And so I decide I want to be brave and tell him on the last night of camp. It's a meta. Last night of camp being like a turn of phrase, not literally camp. Okay, that's not in there, but anyway, okay. And before I do, I'm gearing myself up to be brave. I talk it out with our mutual friend. I get a little intel to see whether or not I'm going to make an ass of myself. And my friend is sitting in my room at the conference hotel with me, and he's like, go for it. And he gives me this nugget of hope. Remember that moment in the lobby on day one? He tells me it as they, my crush and he, walked away. My crush said something to him along the lines of, I bet she's an animal in the sack. And my friend's like, a guy wouldn't say that if he didn't at least somewhat at some moment think about you in that way. It doesn't really matter, but just so you're not left lingering, I did tell my crush I crushed him. Verbatim, I said, I fancy you, because of the part of the world in which we were at that moment, and I thought it was funny. And he later pulled me aside and said I was very brave, and he thought I was awesome, and also he didn't want a one-night hookup, and I was okay. And I was like, okay, neither do I. I think maybe I thought, oh, I don't know, he had a crush on me too, and we'd somehow realize we were meant to be and begin a long-distance relationship and fall in love, LOL. But like, whatever, I was brave and blah, 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 and weeks later, I had a phone call with one of the other conference presenters, and she was like, P.S., what was the deal with you and that guy? And I told her the gist of what happened in the last night, and she was like, oh, no, you're not out of your mind. Something was deaf going on there. There was deaf a vibe. So that was reassuring. Anyhow, the point is, I think of the, I bet she's an animal in the sack thing while I walk to the bathroom at the Portland airport, because I'm wondering what I look like to the outside world as I walk to the bathroom bagless in skin-tight clothing. And I wonder if I give off that vibe, animal in the sack, or if also it is clear that too, I am tender and soft, that I am very much a walking duality, true to my Gemini sun, both extrovert and introvert, both writer and performer, yearning to be both a fish and a bird, both mountains and oceans, both an animal in the sack and a tender ass sap. I think about how for years, or at least for months and months after that entire ordeal, I held on to his animal in the sack comment like it was a fucking prize, like it was a compliment, like it was a placeholder for the kind of love for which I am worthy. But today, walking through the Portland airport, I realize it's a crock of shit. I am so much better than that. I deserve so much more than that asshat comment of condescending belittling by someone who, when I was fucking emotional and raw, told me he didn't want a one-night thing. He assumed that's all I was deducible to. And gosh, that's sad. I want someone who wants all of my parts, who sees the softness as loudly as he sees the raw. And I think the obvious takeaway is that I first have to see and embrace the softness too. I have to own it, revel in it, know it makes up for so much of my soul. And so maybe that's why 2 hours later, when my mom and sister are long in the air, and I go back to the bathroom again, this time with both of my carry-ons and my sweatshirt back on, and I brush my teeth alone in the public bathroom with my mask around my left wrist, and look into my own eyes in the mirror and think about how I am both, it's so hard, this noise is so hard, which is obviously a metaphor for the noise inside my head, our heads. And it's like really frustrating me, and I want it to go away. And I think that's also probably a metaphor and why this is, I just gotta be in this, okay? I just like want to break from the noise. And think about how I both am and also how I feel really beautiful and like the way I look. I think about this moment in January 2014. I was a few months into being single after Jonathan and I broke up, and I was in Indianapolis for a performance gig. And I'd met this dude at a bar after my show. This is itself a literal other piece of art too, if you want all the deets. They aren't important here, but for what it's worth, it's a really good story if you want to go poke around, no pun intended, to get the whole scoop. And we ended up back at his place having absolutely epic sex. He lived in a loft, and his bed was upstairs in the loft, and the bathroom was downstairs. And at one point, I went downstairs to pee, and I can't remember why. This was years ago now, which is funny to note here since you probably noticed I have a knack for remembering shit from a long time ago in excruciating detail. But he went back downstairs too. Maybe to get water. I don't fucking know. But I know that I had to have been naked, or at least half naked, or at least it was after we had already started hooking up. But I remember walking back up the stairs to the loft, and my hair was longer than it had been in many, many years. And it sort of fell over my shoulders, and I turned my head and looked back at him down the stairs, and I watched him stare at me with really fucking hungry eyes. And I felt so alive. I felt like I knew my sexual power. I felt like I was able to embody what I knew he saw in me, that I could also see too. I'm not saying Jonathan hadn't made me feel beautiful, he had. But by the end of our relationship and after the way our breakup went down, I had to work so fucking hard to fall back in love with myself. And it was working. And that moment in Indianapolis in the middle of the night, that wasn't me responding or reacting first to what this dude saw in me. That was me owning my own shit first and watching him know. And maybe that's the softness. You might think it's the animal in the sack, but I'm telling you, after how much I fucking hated myself, after the rage I took out on my body and my skin with an eating disorder and so much self-harm, that knowing, that looking at myself in the mirror alone in the bathroom at the Portland airport while brushing my fucking teeth, that shit is so fucking tender and soft. But it's also loud. In a world that's spent trillions of dollars for me to hate myself, that softness is still fucking loud. And it must have been there when I was 3 weeks shy of 25. I mean, that was literally exactly 15 years ago. Maybe we're the same Caroline. Maybe what I see in the mirror is her.